The first thing Shayla felt when she woke was cold. Not the kind that made you shiver and pull a blanket tighter. This was the cold that came from the inside, from a place where something vital had been ripped away, leaving only an empty, frozen wound behind. Her fingers dug into wet earth. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the forest floor into a slick mess of mud and decaying leaves. Somewhere above, thunder rolled through the sky like the growl of an angry god. The storm had been raging for hours now, or maybe days. She couldn't tell anymore. Time had become strange and slippery ever since the ceremony. Ever since the rejection. Ever since her blood touched the sacred stone. Shayla pushed herself up on trembling arms, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps. Her ribs screamed in protest. Blood, her own, had soaked through the thin ceremonial dress they'd forced her to wear. The white fabric, meant to symbolize purity and submission during the mating ritual, was now stained dark with mud and crimson. They'd told her to leave quietly, to accept the judgment with grace, to disappear into the night like a shadow that had overstayed its welcome. She hadn't left quietly enough. The wolves had made sure of that. Her bare feet slipped as she tried to stand, and she went down hard on one knee. Pain exploded up her leg, white-hot and vicious. She bit down on her lip to keep from crying out, tasting copper and salt. Making noise now would be suicide. They were still hunting her. She could feel it in the way the forest seemed to hold its breath, in the unnatural silence between thunderclaps. The Silver Fang pack didn't tolerate disobedience. And rejecting the Alpha King in front of the Full Moon Council? That wasn't just disobedience. That was treason. Shayla pressed her back against the rough bark of an ancient oak, trying to steady her breathing, trying to think through the fog of pain and exhaustion. Her fingers brushed against the wound at her side, a deep gash where one of the enforcers had caught her with his claws as she'd run. The bleeding had slowed, but not stopped. She was leaving a trail. They would find her. They always found runaways. But something was different this time. Something the elders hadn't anticipated, something even she didn't fully understand. The moment her blood had fallen onto that stone, the sacred rock that had witnessed 1,000 matings, 1,000 bond ceremonies, everything had changed. The air had crackled with energy. The ground had trembled. And for just a heartbeat, Shayla had felt something wake up inside her. Something old. Something that recognized her in a way nothing else ever had. The Alpha King had felt it too. She'd seen it in his eyes, that flicker of uncertainty, quickly masked by contempt. And then he'd smiled. That smile haunted her now as she stumbled through the rain-soaked forest. Cold. Dismissive. Relieved. He'd smiled because he thought he was free. Free of the burden of a mate he'd never wanted, an Omega healer with no status, no family, no worth. The bond had snapped cleanly, or so it seemed. He'd walked away without a backward glance, his shoulders relaxed for the first time since the mating ceremony had begun. He didn't know. None of them knew. The bond hadn't broken. It had transformed into something else entirely, something the ancient texts had warned about but no one living had ever witnessed. The elders had called it weakness, had declared her tainted, had sentenced her to exile. But weakness didn't make the earth shake. Weakness didn't make the sacred stone crack down the middle. Weakness didn't make an Alpha King's wolf go silent. Shayla's hand trembled as she touched the mark on her inner wrist, a silver brand that had appeared the moment her blood touched the stone. It glowed faintly even now, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The shape was strange, like intertwined flames and roots, ancient symbols she didn't recognize, but somehow understood. A branch snapped somewhere behind her. Her head whipped around, eyes straining through the darkness and rain. The forest was a maze of shadows, every tree a potential hiding place for teeth and claws. Her wolf stirred weakly inside her, trying to surface, trying to help. But the rejection had wounded her beast too. They were both broken in ways that would take time to heal. Time she didn't have. Another sound, closer now. Footsteps, deliberate and measured. Not the frantic pace of trackers, but something else. Something confident. Something that knew exactly where she was and wasn't in any hurry. Shayla forced herself to move, ignoring the fresh wave of pain that shot through her body. Every instinct screamed at her to shift, to let her wolf take over and run. But she was too weak. The transformation would kill her right now, and that would make all of this suffering pointless. She had to survive. Had to get beyond the pack borders. Had to find out what this mark meant, what power had awakened inside her when everything else was being stripped away. The rain was beginning to slow, which meant dawn wasn't far off. In daylight, hiding would be impossible. Her foot caught on an exposed root, and she went down again, this time unable to catch herself. She hit the ground hard, the air rushing from her lungs. For a moment, she just lay there, cheek pressed against the cold mud, wondering if maybe it would be easier to just stop running. To let the darkness take her. To let the pack have their justice. But then she felt it again, that pulse of energy from the mark on her wrist. Warm. Insistent. Alive. And with it came a whisper, so faint she might have imagined it. Get up. Not a command. An invitation. A promise that this wasn't the end, even though it felt like one. Shayla's fingers curled into the earth. Her jaw clenched. And with every ounce of strength she had left, she pushed herself back to her feet. The footsteps behind her had stopped. But she could feel eyes on her now. Watching. Waiting. She stumbled forward, deeper into the forest, leaving behind the only home she'd ever known. The pack would say she died out here. The Alpha King would forget her name. The elders would use her story as a warning to other Omegas who dared to dream beyond their station. They would all be wrong. Because Shayla wasn't running away from the Silver Fang pack. She was running towards something they couldn't begin to understand. Something that had been sleeping for centuries, waiting for blood and pain and a rejection so profound it tore through the very fabric of what bound wolf to wolf, land to alpha, power to throne. Her blood hadn't weakened the bond. It had rewritten it. And before this story was over, the Alpha King who'd smiled at her exile would learn exactly what he'd lost the moment he let her go. The forest swallowed her whole, and the storm, finally satisfied, began to fade into silence. But the real chaos? That was only just beginning. Shayla made it 3 more miles before her body gave out. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow, inevitable surrender. Her legs simply stopped obeying her. One moment she was moving forward through the thinning trees, the next she was on her hands and knees in a shallow creek, the icy water rushing over her fingers. The forest had changed. She'd crossed into territory she didn't recognize, older trees, thicker undergrowth, an atmosphere that felt different. Heavier. Like the air itself was watching. She'd made it beyond the Silver Fang borders. That much she knew from the way her wolf had relaxed, just slightly. The immediate threat of pack enforcers was gone. But that didn't mean she was safe. Rogue wolves didn't last long in unclaimed territory. And an injured Omega, alone and unmarked by any pack? She might as well have painted a target on her back. The water numbed her hands. She watched her blood ribbon away in the current, diluting into pink trails that disappeared downstream. How much had she lost? Enough that the world kept tilting sideways when she tried to focus. Enough that the cold had stopped bothering her, which she knew was a bad sign. She needed to find shelter. To rest. 2. The scent hit her like a physical blow. Pine and smoke. Iron and earth. Male. Alpha. Close. Her wolf surged upward in sudden panic, and Shayla's head snapped up, eyes scanning the tree-line. Her body tensed to run even though running was no longer possible. This was it. She'd escaped the Silver Fang pack only to stumble directly into another predator's path. Territorial alphas didn't negotiate with trespassers. You're bleeding. The voice came from directly behind her. Shayla spun, lost her balance, and would have fallen face-first into the creek if strong hands hadn't caught her shoulders. The touch sent a shock through her system, not pain, but something else. Something that made the mark on her wrist flare hot beneath her skin. She found herself staring up at a man who had no business existing outside of old stories. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing that looked like it had been made for function rather than appearance. His hair was black, slightly too long, falling into eyes that were the color of amber lit from within. Those eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel pinned, studied, seen in a way that was both terrifying and impossible to look away from. But it was his face that made her breath catch. Sharp angles and harsh beauty, the kind of features that looked like they'd been carved by someone who understood violence and had tried to make something compelling out of it. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against tan skin. He looked like war. Like winter. Like every dangerous thing she'd been taught to fear. And he was touching her. Let go. Her voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. She tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The adrenaline that had kept her moving this far had burned out completely. He didn't let go. Instead, his grip shifted, steadying her as her knees buckled. Easy. You're in shock. I said. She tried again to wrench free, and this time he released her, but stayed close enough to catch her if she fell. Which she almost did. The man's nostrils flared slightly, scenting her, reading her in the way wolves did: injury, fear, pack affiliation, or lack thereof. His expression shifted. Something flickered in those amber eyes. Recognition? No, that was impossible. She'd never seen this man before in her life. She would have remembered. Shayla. Her name in his mouth froze her in place. How do you? The words died in her throat. Her pulse was hammering so hard she could barely think. You don't know me. No? He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he'd been working on for a long time. Then why have I been tracking your blood rail for the last 2 miles? The implication sent ice through her veins. He'd been following her. Deliberately. While she'd been stumbling half dead through the forest, convinced she was alone, he'd been there. Watching. Are you Silver Fawn? The question came out sharper than she intended. No, a pause. Are you? Something about the way he asked made it clear he already knew the answer. The lack of pack scent on her would have told him everything he needed to know. Packless. Rejected. Exiled. Weak. Except he wasn't looking at her like she was weak. He was looking at her like she was dangerous. I'm no one, Shayla said, and hated how hollow it sounded. And I'm leaving. I'll be out of your territory by... This isn't my territory. That stopped her. Then what are you doing here? Looking for you. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and true. The rain had stopped completely now, and in the sudden silence she could hear her own ragged breathing, could feel the way her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. That's not possible. But even as she said it, she felt the mark on her wrist pulse again. Warm. Insistent. And this time, she swore she felt an answering pulse from somewhere else from him. The man's eyes dropped to her wrist, to the place where her hand was pressed against the wound in her side, blood seeping between her fingers. His jaw tightened. You're going to bleed out if that's not treated. He took a step closer, and she forced herself to stand her ground even though everything in her screamed to back away. There's a safe house half a mile north. I can. I don't need your help. The lie was so obvious it was almost funny. She could barely stand. Her vision was going gray at the edges. But accepting help from a strange alpha in the middle of nowhere? That was how wolves ended up in worse situations than exile. Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. You're dying. I'm fine. You're stubborn. You're not my alpha. No, he agreed quietly. I'm not. The way he said it made her look at him again, really look. And what she saw didn't match up with what she'd expected. There was power in him. She could feel it radiating off him like heat, but it wasn't the crushing, dominating force she'd learned to recognize in the Silver Fawn leadership. This was something else. Something more controlled. More deliberate. Like he'd learned to hold himself back. Who are you? She asked. Someone who's been waiting for the sacred stone to crack. His eyes met hers again, and this time she saw it, the knowledge, the certainty. Someone who knew what would happen when your blood touched it. The world tilted. Shayla's hand shot out, gripping his arm to steady herself, and the moment skin touched skin, the mark on her wrist blazed. Light erupted between them, silver and white and pure, bright enough that she had to close her eyes against it. When she opened them again, he was staring at his own wrist, at the matching mark that had appeared there, glowing faintly beneath his skin. Flames and roots. Intertwined. Identical to hers. What? Her voice broke. What is this? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something close to emotion cross his face. Not pity. Not triumph. Something more complicated. Proof, he said softly, that the Alpha King made a mistake. Shayla's legs finally gave out completely. The stranger caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his appearance. She should have fought. Should have demanded answers. Should have done anything except let a strange wolf carry her deeper into unknown territory. But consciousness was slipping away like water through her fingers, and the last thing she felt before the darkness took her was his voice, low and certain. You're safe now. I promise. And the terrifying thing? Part of her wanted to believe him. Shayla woke to warmth. Not the oppressive heat of summer or the stifling closeness of too many bodies packed into the Omega quarters. This was gentle, deliberate. The kind of warmth that came from a fire burning low, from thick blankets, from safety. It felt wrong. Her eyes snapped open, and she immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her skull, sharp and insistent. She squeezed them shut again, breathing through her nose, trying to orient herself without moving. The scent of wood smoke and pine filled her lungs. Herbs too, comfrey and yarrow, the bitter tang of healing salves. Someone had tended her wounds. The realization sent a jolt of panic through her system, and she pushed herself upright despite the way her ribs screamed in protest. The room spun viciously, but she forced her eyes to focus, forced herself to take inventory. Stone walls. A fireplace with embers glowing orange in the dim light. Rough wooden furniture, a table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies. One window, shuttered against the darkness outside. One door. The safe house he'd mentioned. She was lying on a low bed, covered in blankets that smelled clean but worn. Someone had removed her ruined ceremonial dress and replaced it with a soft shirt that was far too large for her frame. Her wounds had been cleaned and bandaged with professional efficiency. And she was alone. Shayla's hand went immediately to her wrist, to the mark that had appeared when she'd touched him. It was still there, no longer glowing but visible, a silver brand against her skin that looked like it had always been part of her. She traced the pattern with trembling fingers. Flames rising upward, roots reaching down, meeting in the middle in a not-so-intricate, she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The symbol of something she didn't understand. The door opened. She tensed, ready to fight or flee despite the fact that both options were currently impossible. But it was him. The stranger from the forest. He carried a water skin and what looked like dried meat wrapped in cloth, moving with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in his own space. He stopped when he saw she was awake, those amber eyes finding hers across the small room. You should still be sleeping, he said. Not a command. Just an observation. Who are you? The question came out rougher than she intended, her throat raw from screaming and running and crying. He set the supplies down on the table, deliberate and unhurried. My name is Kieran. Kieran. The name settled into her mind like it belonged there, which was unsettling in its own right. She waited for more, a pack name, a title, an explanation, but he offered nothing else. What do you want from me? Nothing you're not willing to give. He poured water into a wooden cup, brought it to her. When she didn't take it immediately, he set it on the floor beside the bed. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. You need to drink. 6 hours. The full weight of that hit her. 6 hours in a stranger's care, vulnerable, unmarked, packless. 6 hours during which he could have done anything. But her wounds were cleanly bandaged. She was clothed. Warm. Alive. "Why are you helping me?" Shayla asked, and hated the suspicion in her own voice. But trust had been carved out of her 3 nights ago when the council had pronounced judgment. When the Alpha King had stood silent and let them call her tainted. When her own people had turned their backs. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, studying her with that unnerving intensity. Then he pushed up his sleeve, revealing the mark on his wrist. It caught the firelight, silver against his tan skin. "Because we're connected," he said simply. "And because I know what they did to you." The words landed like a blow. Shayla's fingers curled into the blanket, her breath catching. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're an Omega healer from the Silverfang pack. I know you were raised on the edges, never quite belonging. I know 3 nights ago you were called to a mating ceremony you never asked for." His voice was steady, factual, but there was something underneath it. Something that sounded like anger held on a very tight leash. "I know you rejected the Alpha King in front of the Full Moon Council. And I know your blood touched the sacred stone." Each fact felt like a violation. Like he'd reached inside her chest and pulled out every private humiliation, every secret shame. "How?" The word came out broken. "How do you know any of that?" "Because I've been watching the Silverfang pack for years." Kieran moved to the fireplace, adding wood with practiced ease. The flames jumped higher, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. Waiting for a sign that the old bloodlines weren't completely dead. That somewhere in their carefully controlled lineages, something true might still survive. "I don't understand." He turned to face her fully, and in the better light she could see the weight he carried. This wasn't a young wolf playing at power. This was someone who'd lived long enough to accumulate scars, visible and otherwise. "The mating ceremonies," he said. "They're not what they used to be. The Silverfang pack, most packs now, they've turned them into political theater. Displays of dominance. The sacred stone is just a prop. They've forgotten what it actually is." Shayla's throat tightened. She'd felt it too, standing in front of that ancient rock with the full moon overhead and the pack watching like hungry spectators. The wrongness of it. The way the ritual felt hollow, performative. Like they were going through motions no one truly understood anymore. "What is it?" she whispered. "A conduit." Kieran's eyes held hers. "Between the land and the wolves who inhabit it. Between power and those worthy of wielding it. The old alphas didn't rule through strength alone. They ruled because the land itself chose them, recognized them, bound itself to them through blood and oath." The mark on her wrist burned, a phantom heat that made her gasp. "But those bloodlines were supposed to be extinct," Kieran continued. "Bred out over generations as the packs prioritized strength over connection, dominance over balance. The sacred stones became relics. Pretty rocks that made ceremonies feel official." He paused. "Until 3 nights ago, when your blood proved everyone wrong." Shayla shook her head, even though the motion made her dizzy. "I'm nobody. I'm an Omega. I have no lineage, no. You have the mark." His voice cut through her protests, gentle but firm. "That only appears when true blood touches the stone. Not alpha blood. Not the strongest or the most dominant." He took a step closer. "Blood that the land recognizes as its own." The memories crashed over her then, vivid and brutal. Standing in the ceremonial circle. The Alpha King, Darius. His name was Darius, though she'd never been permitted to use it, looking at her with cold assessment. Not hatred. That would have implied she mattered enough to hate. Just calculation. The crowd watching with barely concealed curiosity, wondering what the reclusive Alpha King had drawn as his fated mate. An Omega. A healer with no family name. A wolf who'd spent her whole life being useful and invisible. The elders had performed the ritual with practiced efficiency. Words spoken in the old tongue, most of which she hadn't understood. The cutting of palms, the pressing of hands, The moment when their blood was supposed to mingle over the stone and seal the bond. Except Darius had pulled his hand back, had spoken the words of rejection clearly, without hesitation, had severed the bond before it could fully form. The pack had gasped. Rejections happened, but not like this. Not so publicly. Not so coldly. And Shayla, standing there with her palms still bleeding, had felt something crack open inside her chest. Not her heart, that was already braced for this, had known from the moment she'd been summoned that she would never be enough. But something deeper. Something that had been sleeping her entire life, waiting for a wound profound enough to wake it. She'd looked at Darius. At the slight relief in his expression, quickly masked. At the way he'd already dismissed her, already moved on. And she'd done the unthinkable. She'd rejected him back. Not because it would change anything, the bond was already broken, the damage done. But because some stubborn, burning part of her had refused to let him be the only one walking away. Refused to stand there bleeding and silent while he claimed his freedom without cost. The words had felt like glass in her throat. I, Shayla of No House, reject you as alpha and mate. The elders had frozen. The pack had gone silent. And Darius had looked at her for the first time with something other than indifference. Surprise. And then, quickly, contempt. Her hand had still been extended, blood dripping from her palm. One drop had fallen. Had landed directly on the center of the sacred stone. The world had exploded. Not literally, though later she would wonder. Light had burst from the stone, silver and blinding. The ground had trembled. And for one impossible moment, Shayla had felt connected to everything. To the earth beneath her feet, to the trees surrounding the ceremony ground, to the very air itself. She'd felt the land recognize her. And then the pain had hit. Searing, absolute, dropping her to her knees as the mark burned itself into her wrist. The elders had been shouting. The pack had surged forward. And Darius had smiled. A small thing, barely there, but unmistakable. He'd thought the spectacle was her weakness manifesting. Her inability to handle rejection. He'd thought the stone cracking down the middle was a sign of her failure, not his. He'd turned and walked away while she'd knelt there bleeding, marked, broken. The enforcers had come for her that night. Had told her the elders declared her tainted. That her presence would corrupt the pack. That she had until dawn to leave Silverfang territory or be killed as a rogue. They'd made sure she didn't leave quietly. They hunted you. Kieran's voice pulled her back to the present. He'd moved closer without her noticing, was crouched beside the bed now, those amber eyes locked on her face. Didn't they? Shayla couldn't speak around the tightness in her throat. She just nodded. Because they were afraid. Not a question. A statement of fact. The Alpha King's wolf went silent the moment you crossed the border. Did you know that? Her head snapped up. What? His connection to the pack, to the land, it started failing the moment you left. Small things at first. His commands carrying less weight. His presence feeling diminished. Kieran's expression was grim. By the second day, wolves were losing control during shifts. By the third, the territory boundaries were weakening. And Darius, the name dripped with disdain. Couldn't figure out why. Shayla's mind reeled. That's not possible. I didn't. I'm not. You're not what? Powerful. Kieran reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched the mark on her wrist. The contact sent that familiar jolt through her, silver light sparking between their skin. This says otherwise. The land chose you, Shayla. Not him. And by rejecting you, by letting them exile you, he didn't free himself. Kieran's fingers traced the pattern on her wrist, flames and roots intertwined. He severed his own connection to everything that made him alpha. The implications crashed over her like a wave. If what he was saying was true, if the bond hadn't just broken but transferred somehow. Why do you have the mark too? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Kieran pulled back his hand, but didn't move away. Because I'm what's called a warden. Someone born to protect the balance between wolves and the land they inhabit. We used to serve the old bloodlines, the true alphas chosen by the earth itself. His jaw tightened. But those bloodlines died out. Or so we thought. I've spent my whole life watching packs tear themselves apart fighting over power they were never meant to hold. And now? He met her eyes. Now the land has chosen again. And I'm bound to protect what it's claimed. The weight of it was too much. Shayla pulled the blanket tighter around herself, suddenly exhausted despite having just woken. I don't want this. I didn't ask to be. No one asks, Kieran said quietly. Power like this doesn't care about what we want. It cares about what's needed. I'm not powerful. I'm just. You survived a rejection that should have killed you. You walked away from your pack with half the territory hunting you. You made it through hostile land while bleeding out. He stood, giving her space. And you're still here. Still fighting. That's not weakness, Shayla. That's strength they never let you recognize. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he was seeing something in her that didn't exist. But her wrist was warm beneath his touch, the mark pulsing with a life of its own. And somewhere deep inside, in the place where her wolf lived, she felt the truth of his words. The land had chosen her. Now she just had to figure out what the hell that meant. 2 days passed in the safe house before Shayla could walk without her vision going dark at the edges. Kieran was patient in a way that unnerved her. He brought food, changed her bandages, kept the fire burning through the cold nights. But he didn't push. Didn't demand answers or explanations. Didn't treat her like something fragile that needed careful handling. He treated her like she was exactly what he'd said, someone the land had chosen. Someone worth protecting. It made her feel like a fraud. On the third morning, she woke to find him already up, packing supplies into a worn leather bag. The sight sent immediate anxiety spiking through her chest. Where are you going? He glanced over his shoulder. We're going. You're strong enough to travel now. Travel where? Somewhere you can get answers. He finished with the bag, turned to face her fully. There's a place 2 days north. Old ruins, what's left of a temple from before the packs divided into territories. If the myths are right, it's where the first sacred stones were placed. Shayla pushed herself to sitting, ignoring the dull ache in her ribs. And if the myths are wrong? Then we wasted 2 days walking. He moved to the fireplace, began banking the embers. But I don't think they are. The mark on your wrist isn't random, Shayla. It's a map. And I think it's trying to lead you somewhere. She looked down at the silver brand, at the way the flames and roots seemed to pulse faintly even in daylight. He was right, she'd felt it over the past few days. A pull, gentle but persistent, like a thread tugging at her consciousness, trying to guide her north. She'd been ignoring it, trying to convince herself it was just trauma, just her mind playing tricks. What if I don't want to go? Kieran met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something like sympathy cross his face. Then you stay here. I'll bring you supplies, keep you safe until you're ready to decide what comes next. He paused. But the pull won't stop. And eventually, you'll need to know what this means. He was giving her a choice. Actually giving her a choice, not just the illusion of one. It was such a foreign concept that for a moment she didn't know how to respond. In the Silver Fang pack, Omegas didn't get choices. They got assignments, duties, expectations. The path was laid out before birth and deviation meant punishment. But she wasn't Silver Fang anymore. She wasn't anything anymore. Except maybe something the land had chosen. 2 days, she asked. If we move carefully. 3 if you need to rest. Shayla took a breath, felt her wolf stir inside her. The beast had been quiet since the rejection, wounded and withdrawn. But now she felt it lift its head, felt something like curiosity in the way it pressed against her consciousness. North. The direction felt right in a way she couldn't explain. All right, she said. We go north. They left within the hour. Kieran set a pace that was steady but not punishing, checking on her frequently without making it obvious. The forest was thick here, older than anything near Silver Fong territory. The trees were massive, their trunks wide enough that 3 wolves couldn't circle them with linked arms. Moss covered everything, turning the world into shades of green and gray. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. And it felt like coming home. Shayla tried not to think about that too hard. They walked in silence mostly. Kieran seemed comfortable with it, and Shayla was still too uncertain of this strange alliance to fill the quiet with unnecessary words. But occasionally, he'd point out landmarks, a stream that ran clear even in winter, a tree that had been split by lightning but continued growing, a circle of stones that marked an old pack boundary long since abandoned. He knew this land intimately, like he'd spent years mapping every inch of it. "How long have you been out here?" she asked as they stopped beside a creek to refill their water skins. 10 years. Give or take. He knelt by the water, filled his container with practiced efficiency. "I left my birth pack when I came of age. Warden bloodlines aren't welcome in modern packs. We're considered relics at best. Threats at worst." "Why threats?" He was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "Because we can sense when an alpha's claim to power is false. When they're holding their position through force rather than rightful authority." He glanced at her. "Most current alphas don't appreciate that particular ability." Shayla filled her own water skin, turning his words over in her mind. "Is that why you were watching Silverfong? You sensed something?" "I sensed an imbalance. The territory was stable, but it felt wrong. Like a structure built on a cracked foundation, functional for now, but not sustainable." He stood, shouldered his pack. "When I heard about the Alpha King's mating ceremony, I knew something would shift. I just didn't know how. And now you're bound to me." She couldn't keep the guilt from her voice. "Because of a mark you didn't ask for." Kieran looked at her steadily. "I've spent 10 years waiting for the land to speak again. To choose again. This," he touched his wrist, "isn't a burden, Shayla. It's the first thing that's made sense in a long time." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They continued north. They reached the ruins at sunset on the second day. Shayla felt it before she saw it, a change in the air, a heaviness that pressed against her skin like the moments before a thunderstorm. The forest opened into a clearing, and there, rising from the earth like the bones of some ancient creature, were the remains of what must have once been magnificent. Stone pillars, twice the height of a man, formed a circle around a raised platform. Most were cracked or fallen, covered in vines and moss. But some still stood, defiant against time and weather. At the center of the circle was an altar, a massive slab of dark stone carved with symbols she recognized from her wrist. Flames and roots. Life and death. Power and sacrifice. "This is it," Kieran said quietly, reverently. "The first temple." Shayla stepped into the clearing and immediately felt the mark on her wrist flare hot. Not painful, but insistent. Like it was responding to proximity to something it recognized. The pull she'd been feeling for days intensified, drawing her forward. Her feet moved without conscious thought, carrying her between the pillars toward the central altar. Behind her, she heard Kieran following at a respectful distance. The altar was massive up close. Black stone veined with silver, polished smooth despite centuries of exposure. The symbols carved into its surface seemed to move in the fading light, shifting and reforming into patterns that hurt to look at directly. Shayla's hand reached out, trembling, and touched the cold stone. The world exploded into light. She was standing in the same clearing, but it was different. The pillars were whole, gleaming white marble instead of crumbling stone. The altar was pristine, and around it stood figures in robes marked with silver flames. A ceremony. But not like the hollow ritual she'd endured in Silverfong. This was alive, vital, thrumming with power that made her teeth ache. A woman stood at the altar. Young, fierce-eyed, her hand pressed against the stone. Blood dripped from her palm, fresh and bright red, and where it touched the altar, light bloomed. Silver. Pure. Blinding. The robed figures chanted in a language Shayla didn't know but somehow understood. Child of flame and root, blood of the first earth, we bind you to what was, what is, what shall be. You are chosen. You are keeper. You are balance made flesh. The woman's back arched, her mouth opening in a silent scream as power poured into her. Through her. The mark appeared on her wrist, flames and roots intertwined, and the ground beneath the entire clearing trembled. When she lowered her hand, her eyes had changed. Still human, still her own, but lit from within with silver fire. I accept, she said, and her voice echoed with more than one tone. I am bound. The vision shifted. The same woman, older now, standing on a battlefield. Wolves surrounding her, hundreds of them, feral and lost, fighting each other with mindless violence. The early days, Shayla realized. Before packs. Before order. When shifters were little more than beasts wearing human skin. The woman raised her hand and the earth answered. Roots erupted from the ground, separating the fighting wolves. Flames danced along her fingers, not burning but illuminating. And when she spoke, every wolf froze. Enough. One word. But it carried the weight of the land itself. You forget what you are, the woman said, walking among the stilled wolves. You are not beasts. You are not monsters. You are children of this earth, given the gift of two forms. And you will learn to live as both, or you will destroy everything. She pressed her hand to the ground and light spread outward in waves. Where it touched, the wolves began to shift, not to human or beast, but to something between. To clarity. To consciousness. The first pack bonds formed that day. The first territories were marked. The first sacred stones were placed. All through her blood. The vision shifted again. Now Shayla saw dozens of women and men, all bearing the mark. Scattered across different times, different territories. Each one standing at a sacred stone. Each one binding themselves to the land, creating balance, holding the line between civilization and chaos. The bloodline. The chosen ones. And then she saw them fade. One by one. The marks disappearing as the bearers died without heirs, as the old ways were forgotten, as the packs grew strong enough to believe they didn't need the land's blessing anymore. Until there were none. Until the sacred stones became props and the ceremonies became theater and the balance began to crack. The final vision hit her like a physical blow. It was the Silver Fong ceremony ground. 3 nights ago. But she was seeing it from above, from the perspective of something vast and patient and old. The land itself, watching. It saw Darius reject her. Saw her blood fall on the stone. And she felt what the land felt in that moment. Recognition. Relief. Hunger. Finally. One returns. The bond that should have formed between her and Darius shattered, yes. But the pieces didn't disappear. They reformed, realigned, connected to something much older and much more powerful. The land claimed her, chose her, bound her. And Darius, by rejecting that bond, had rejected his own claim to everything his position represented. He'd smiled at her exile, not knowing he was watching his own authority die. Shayla came back to herself gasping, her hand still pressed against the altar. Kieran was there immediately, steadying her as her knees buckled. What did you see? His voice was urgent but controlled. Everything. The word came out broken. I saw, the first one. The bloodline. What we were supposed to be. Keepers, Kieran said softly. That's what the old texts called them. Not rulers. Not alphas. Keepers of the balance between wolf and land. Shayla looked down at her wrist, at the mark that suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. They're all gone. The bloodline died out. Not all of it. Kieran's hand covered hers, his own mark pressed against her palm. You're here. And the land doesn't make mistakes. I don't know how to be what it needs. I'm just. You're exactly what it needs. His voice was firm, certain. Someone who understands what it means to be powerless. Someone who won't mistake strength for righteousness. He pulled back slightly, met her eyes. The old keepers weren't the strongest wolves. They were the most connected, the most willing to listen. Shayla's hand trembled against the altar. She could still feel it, the presence of something vast and patient, waiting just beneath the surface of reality, waiting for her to accept what she'd been given. "What happens if I do this?" she whispered. "If I accept? The land answers to you. Not Darius. Not any alpha who claims power without earning it." Kieran's expression was grave. "But it also means you become responsible for the balance, for holding the line between order and chaos. And there are wolves who won't accept that, who'll see you as a threat to their authority. Like the Silver Fang pack. Like every pack built on dominance rather than connection." He paused. "This isn't a small thing, Shayla. This is choosing to stand against everything modern packs have become. To call them back to something they've forgotten." She thought about Darius. About his smile as she'd been exiled. About the way the pack had turned on her without question, believing the elders' judgment that she was tainted. They'd called her weak, worthless, a stain on their perfect order. And all along, she'd been the only thing holding their territory together. Shayla looked at Kieran, at the steady certainty in his amber eyes. "You really believe I can do this?" "I believe the land doesn't choose lightly." He touched her cheek, the gesture surprisingly gentle. "And I believe you're stronger than they ever let you know." The mark on her wrist pulsed, warm and insistent. North. The pull had brought her here. To this place. To this moment. To this choice. She could walk away. Could refuse the burden, find some quiet corner of the world to disappear into. Spend her life as she'd always spent it, invisible, powerless, safe. Or she could press her bloody palm to this altar and claim what the land had already given her. Shayla took a breath, made her choice, and placed both hands flat against the ancient stone. The power that rushed through Shayla wasn't gentle. It hit like a flood breaking through a dam, raw, ancient, overwhelming. Every nerve in her body lit up at once. She tried to pull her hands away from the altar, but couldn't, her palms sealed to the stone as if the rock itself had melted and reformed around her skin. Silver light erupted from the point of contact, spiraling upward in columns that illuminated the entire clearing. The fallen pillars trembled. The earth beneath her feet rolled like water. And inside her mind, something vast and patient and impossibly old opened its eyes. "Child of scattered blood. Daughter of forgotten lines. We have waited so long." The voice wasn't words so much as feeling, ancient recognition, relief, hunger all rolled into something that pressed against her consciousness, like a physical weight. "You are the first to return. The first to remember. Will you carry what your ancestors bore?" Shayla couldn't form words. The power was too much, filling every empty space inside her, burning away weakness and fear and doubt. It felt like being remade from the inside out. "Will you keep the balance? Will you hold the line? Will you stand between wolf and chaos, even when both turn their teeth against you?" Through the overwhelming flood of sensation, Shayla managed one word: yes. The altar blazed white-hot beneath her palms. The mark on her wrist split open, not painfully, but like a flower blooming, and silver flame poured out. It raced up her arms, across her shoulders, down her spine. Everywhere it touched, she felt connections forming. To the earth beneath her feet. To the trees surrounding the clearing. To water running in distant streams and wind moving through high branches. To the wolves. Oh gods, she could feel them. Every shifter within 100 miles, their presences like bright points of light in her awareness. Some steady and strong, others flickering, unstable. And far to the south, in Silver Fang territory. Chaos. The bonds there were fraying, snapping, reforming wrong. Wolves fighting their own beasts. Alphas unable to maintain control. The entire structure collapsing in on itself because the foundation had been ripped away. Because she had been ripped away. They severed what should not be broken. Now they suffer the consequence. This is the price of forgetting. Can I fix it? Shayla gasped, even as the power continued to pour into her. Can I help them? You can restore balance. But balance is not mercy. Balance is truth. The light began to fade, slowly, the power settling into her bones instead of burning through her blood. When it finally released her, Shayla collapsed backward into Kieran's waiting arms. He lowered her to the ground carefully, his face tight with concern. Shayla, can you hear me? She could hear everything. The whisper of wind through leaves. The heartbeat of a deer half a mile away. The slow groan of tree roots growing deeper into earth. And underneath it all, the steady pulse of the land itself, ancient, patient, alive. I can hear it, she whispered. All of it. Everything. Kieran's hand found hers, squeezed gently. The connection. It's fully open now. Shayla forced her eyes to focus on his face. The world looked different, sharper, more vibrant. She could see the faint glow of power around him, the way it moved through his body like a second heartbeat. The warden's gift. He was tied to this too, to the old ways, the old purposes. Something's wrong, she said, pushing herself to sitting despite the way her muscles trembled. In Silver Fang territory. I can feel it. The pack is falling apart, Kieran finished grimly. Without the Keeper's presence, the bonds that hold a pack together start to fray. Especially when those bonds were built on false foundations. They're hurting. Shayla pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the distant echo of pain and confusion from wolves she'd once known. Wolves who'd turned their backs on her, yes, but who were suffering now for sins they didn't understand. I have to. No, Kieran's voice was sharp. You're not strong enough yet. The connection is new, raw. If you try to reach that far right now, it could kill you. But there. They made their choice, he said, not without sympathy. And now they're living with the consequences. That's not cruelty, Shayla. That's balance. She wanted to argue. Wanted to insist that she could help, that she had to try. But her body was already shaking from the effort of sitting upright, and she could feel the truth in his words. The power inside her was immense, but untrained. Using it recklessly would be like a child picking up a blade, more likely to harm herself than help anyone. A sound cut through the clearing, the sharp crack of a branch breaking under weight. Kieran was on his feet instantly, placing himself between Shayla and the edge of the tree line. His whole body had gone tense, predatory, and she realized with a start that she'd never actually seen him ready for violence before. He looked terrifying. Show yourself, he called out, his voice carrying the weight of command. Now. For a long moment, nothing. Then figures emerged from between the trees. 5 of them, all male, all moving with the careful coordination of trained fighters. Shayla's heart sank as she recognized the lead wolf. Torin, one of Silverfang's senior enforcers. She'd seen him around the pack grounds, always at Darius's right hand, always watching everything with cold calculation. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his eyes sweeping over the scene, the glowing altar, the brightened pillars, Kieran's protective stance, and finally Shayla, still on the ground, visibly weakened. Well, Torin said, his voice carrying false pleasantness. The rumors were true. The tainted Omega did survive. Kieran's growl was low and dangerous. Leave. Now. While you still can. Torin's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm afraid we can't do that. The Alpha King sent us to retrieve something that belongs to Silver Fang territory. His gaze locked on Shayla. Or rather, someone who stole from it. I stole nothing. Shayla forced herself to her feet, using the altar for support. Her legs felt like water, but she refused to meet these wolves while kneeling. I was exiled. That means I have no ties to Silver Fang. Your blood touched the sacred stone, Torin countered. That makes you bound to our territory whether you like it or not. And the chaos you've caused by leaving? That's theft of the highest order. One of the other enforcers shifted his weight, eager. The Alpha King wants her back. Wants to understand what she did. How she broke the bond. She didn't break anything, Kieran said, his voice deadly calm. Your alpha did. By rejecting a true mate, he severed his own connection to the land. That's not her fault. Torin's expression hardened. I don't care whose fault it is. I care that wolves are dying. That our territory is unstable. That our alpha's commands barely hold weight anymore. He took a step forward. And I care that the solution to all of it is standing right there, looking weak enough to carry home. Shayla felt Kieran's power spike, felt the way the air around him seemed to thicken with threat. But she also felt something else, a pull from the altar at her back, a whisper of the vast presence she'd just connected with. They come for you in bad faith. They seek to bind what should be free. Will you allow this? No, she whispered. The enforcers moved as one, coordinated and fast. But Kieran was faster. He met the first attacker mid-leap, turning the wolf's momentum against him and sending him crashing into a pillar. The second got closer, claws extended, but Kieran caught his wrist and broke it with a sharp twist that made Shayla wince. But there were 5 of them and only one of him, and they were trained for exactly this kind of fight. Torin circled wide, heading directly for Shayla while his wolves kept Kieran occupied. His eyes were calculating, cold. You're coming with us. Whether you walk or we drag you is your choice. Shayla's hand pressed against the altar behind her. She could feel the power there, vast and waiting. Could feel it offering itself to her, ready to defend what it had claimed. But she was so tired, so new to this. Using it now, in her current state. Torin lunged. Shayla reacted on instinct. Silver flame erupted from her outstretched palm, not aimed but explosive, a wave of pure power that sent Torin flying backward. He hit the ground hard, smoke rising from his chest where the flame had made contact. The clearing went absolutely silent. Every wolf froze, staring at Shayla. At the silver fire still dancing along her fingers. At the way the mark on her wrist had begun to glow again, brighter than before. She's one of the enforcers stumbled backward. She's one of them. The old blood. The keepers. Impossible, Torin rasped, pushing himself up on shaking arms. They're extinct. Dead. Gone. Clearly not. Kieran's voice cut through the shock. He'd subdued the wolves attacking him and now stood at the ready, blood on his knuckles, but otherwise unharmed. And if you had any sense, you'd run before she decides you're a threat worth eliminating. Shayla wanted to laugh at that. She could barely stand, let alone eliminate anyone. The single burst of power had taken almost everything she had left. Her vision was graying at the edges, and it was only her grip on the altar keeping her upright. But the enforcers didn't know that. Torin climbed to his feet, his expression twisted with something between fear and fury. The Alpha King will hear about this. About what you've become. Good, Shayla said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Let him hear. Let him understand what he rejected. She took a breath, forced herself to stand unsupported even though it made her muscles scream. And tell him this, Silverfang's chaos is his doing, not mine. He wanted freedom from the mate bond? He has it. But freedom comes with a price. You're killing us, one of the other enforcers said, and for the first time she heard genuine fear in the accusation. Wolves are losing control. 3 have already died in dominance fights that got out of hand. The borders are failing. Rogues are testing our defenses. The words hit harder than she expected. 3 dead. Because of her absence. Because of the severed connection. Not because of you, the presence whispered. Because of him. Because of choices made before you were born. Because they built on sand and called it stone. I can't fix what your alpha broke, Shayla said quietly. The bond he rejected can't be restored. He made his choice. Then we're all doomed. The enforcer who spoke sounded young, desperate. No, the word came from somewhere deep inside her, from the part now connected to something vast and ancient. You're being forced to evolve. To find a new balance. It will be painful. But it's necessary. Cryptic mystical bullshit, Torin spat. The Alpha King was right about you. You're useless. The insult should have hurt. A week ago it would have. But now, standing in a sacred place with power humming through her veins and the land itself recognizing her worth, it just sounded hollow. Leave, Kieran said, his voice carrying absolute finality. Before I stop being merciful. Torin looked like he wanted to argue. Looked like he wanted to attack again despite the burn mark on his chest and the silver fire still flickering around Shayla's fingers. But he was a survivor, and survivors knew when a fight was lost. This isn't over, he said. No, Shayla agreed. It's not. But the next time you come for me, bring your Alpha King. Let him face what he threw away. Torin's jaw clenched. Then he turned, gestured sharply to his wolves, and they melted back into the forest as quickly as they'd appeared. The moment they were gone, Shayla's legs gave out. Kieran caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her carefully. You're all right. You did well. I can barely stand. Her laugh came out shaky. That's not doing well. You faced down 5 trained enforcers while barely able to hold yourself up, and you sent their leader flying with nothing but instinct. His hand cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. That's doing incredibly well. The silver fire had faded from her hands, but she could still feel it, coiled inside her, waiting. Ready to protect. Ready to burn. They'll go back to Darius, she said. Tell him what happened. What I am. Yes. And he'll come for me. Kieran's expression went hard. Let him try. Shayla wanted to feel afraid. Wanted to panic about what came next, about facing the Alpha who'd rejected her, about wolves dying in a territory she no longer called home. But instead, she felt something else settling into place. Something that felt like certainty. Like purpose. I need to get stronger, she said. Need to learn how to use this properly. Before he comes. Then we train. Kieran helped her to her feet, steadied her when she swayed. Starting tomorrow. For now, you need rest. Tomorrow might be too late. Tomorrow is all we have. He touched the mark on her wrist, his own glowing in response. And I promise you, Shayla, when Darius comes, you'll be ready. She looked back at the altar, at the sacred place that had given her everything the Silver Fang Pack had tried to take away. Power. Purpose. Worth. And she made a silent vow. When the Alpha King came, and he would come, he wouldn't find the broken, exiled Omega he'd smiled at while watching her bleed. He would find a keeper. And he would learn exactly what he'd lost. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of training, exhaustion, and slow discovery. Kieran found them shelter in a cave system 3 miles east of the temple ruins, deep enough to be defensible, hidden enough that casual travelers would never stumble across it. He'd clearly used it before. There were supplies cached in waterproof containers, a fire pit with a natural chimney that vented smoke through cracks in the rock ceiling, even a small spring that provided fresh water. It felt less like hiding and more like preparing. Every morning began the same way. Kieran would wake her before dawn, lead her outside, and make her sit in silence with her hands pressed to bare earth. Feel it, he'd say. Don't force. Don't grasp. Just feel. At first, Shayla felt nothing but cold dirt and her own frustration. But slowly, so slowly, she began to sense something underneath. A pulse. Steady and ancient, like a heartbeat buried miles deep. The land breathing. Once she could hold that connection without losing it, Kieran taught her to reach further. To sense the wolves moving through distant territories. To feel the health of the forest, the flow of water, the places where balance held strong and the places where it was fracturing. Silver Fang territory felt like an open wound every time her awareness brushed against it. She could feel the chaos there intensifying. Dominance challenges happening daily. Wolves unable to shift smoothly, their beasts fighting for control. The borders were practically non-existent now, with rogues wandering in and out as they pleased. And at the center of it all, Darius. His presence felt diminished, struggling, like a fire burning itself out. Don't linger there, Kieran would say whenever he sensed her attention drifting south. It's not your responsibility to fix what they broke. But it was hard not to feel responsible. Hard not to remember that these were wolves she'd grown up around, even if they'd never truly accepted her. The afternoons were for physical training. Kieran was relentless, but never cruel, pushing her to rebuild strength that had been lost during her flight and exile. He taught her to fight real fighting, not the defensive techniques Omegas were permitted to learn. How to use her smaller size as an advantage. How to read an opponent's intentions in the shift of their weight. How to kill, if it came to that. You're a keeper, he said during one session, after she'd successfully managed to put him on his back for the first time. But that doesn't mean you'll always have access to your power. Sometimes the land's magic will be distant, unreachable. You need to be able to defend yourself with nothing but teeth and will. Shayla wiped sweat from her forehead, breathing hard. Have you always been this cheerful? A smile ghosted across his face, the first real one she'd seen. Only when I'm trying to keep someone alive. The evenings were quieter. They'd sit by the fire, eating whatever game Kieran had caught that day, and he'd tell her stories. About the old keepers and the packs they'd guided. About the wardens who'd served them, bound by marks like the ones they now shared. About the slow decline as bloodlines faded and the modern packs forgot what they'd once been. My grandmother was the last warden to serve a living keeper, he said one night, staring into the flames. She told me stories when I was young. About a woman named Eloan who could calm a rogue wolf with a single word. Who could heal corrupted land just by walking across it. He paused. She died when my grandmother was still young. No heirs. The bloodline ended with her. Until now, Shayla said softly. Until now. His eyes found hers across the fire. My grandmother used to say the land would call again when it was desperate enough. When the balance had tilted so far that collapse was inevitable. His jaw tightened. I didn't want to believe her. Didn't want to think things could get that bad. But they did. They did. He reached across the space between them, touched the mark on her wrist with gentle reverence. And you answered. The contact sent warmth spiraling up her arm. The marks, both hers and his, had grown more responsive to each other over the past days. Whenever they touched, she could feel his presence more clearly. His steady determination. His absolute certainty in her worth. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. What if I'm not enough? The question slipped out before she could stop it. What if the land chose wrong? The land doesn't make mistakes. Kieran's thumb traced the pattern on her skin, flames and roots, intertwined. But even if it did? Even if you were just a woman with a mark and no real power? He looked up, held her gaze. I'd still believe in you. Shayla's breath caught. Why? Because I've watched you survive what should have killed you. I've seen you stand when anyone else would have stayed down. I've felt your compassion even for wolves who exiled you. His hand moved from her wrist to her face, cupping her cheek with a tenderness that made her chest ache. The land chose you, yes. But I chose you too, Shayla. Not because of what you can do. Because of who you are. The words settled into her like warm honey, filling cracks she hadn't realized were still bleeding. In the Silver Fong pack, her worth had always been conditional. Based on usefulness. On staying quiet, staying small, staying out of the way. Kieran saw her. All of her. And found her worthy anyway. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Any of this. The power, the responsibility, she gestured between them, unable to name what was growing there. Neither do I. His smile was crooked, self-deprecating. Wardens are supposed to serve from a distance. Professional. Detached. We're not supposed to, he trailed off, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. We're not supposed to feel like this. Like what? Like you're the only thing that makes sense in a world gone mad. The confession came out rough, raw. Like protecting you isn't duty. It's necessity. Like the thought of anything hurting you makes me want to burn down forests. Shayla leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. That's probably the mark. The binding. It's making you feel. No, the word was firm. The mark bound me to your purpose, to the keeper's calling. This, his other hand found hers, their marked wrists pressed together, silver light pulsing between them. This is choice. Mine. And if you don't feel the same, if this is just me projecting onto a situation I don't fully understand, tell me. Tell me and I'll step back. She opened her eyes, met his gaze across the small distance separating them. Amber eyes lit by firelight, fierce and certain, and offering her something she'd never thought she'd have. Choice. Real choice. Not duty or obligation or bonds forged without consent. I feel it too, she said quietly. And it terrifies me. Why? Because everyone I've ever trusted has hurt me. The admission tasted like ash. My pack turned on me. The Alpha King rejected me. The elders declared me tainted. Everyone who was supposed to protect me chose themselves instead. Her voice cracked. How do I know you won't do the same? Kieran was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he did something that shocked her. He released her wrist, sat back, put physical distance between them. You don't, he said simply. You can't know. Trust isn't about certainty, Shayla. It's about risk. About choosing to believe in someone even though they could hurt you. Even though they might fail. He held her gaze steadily. I can't prove I won't let you down. I'm not perfect. I'll make mistakes. But I can promise you this, I will never betray you deliberately. I will never choose my comfort over your safety. And I will fight beside you until my last breath. That's not. It's all I have to offer. He spread his hands. I'm a warden who walked away from his purpose for 10 years because I was tired of watching packs destroy themselves. I'm someone who's spent more time alone than with others because connection felt like a weakness I couldn't afford. I'm damaged goods, Shayla. But I'm yours if you want me. The vulnerability in his voice shattered something inside her. This powerful, dangerous man who'd appeared out of nowhere to protect her, who'd trained her and sheltered her and believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. He was offering her everything and asking nothing in return except the chance to prove himself. I want you, she whispered. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Kieran closed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand found her face again, tilting her chin up. I'm going to kiss you now, he said, his voice low and rough. If you don't want that, say so. Shayla's answer was to close the final inches between them. The kiss was nothing like what she'd imagined kisses should be. There was no gentleness, no careful exploration. It was desperate and fierce, two people who'd been alone too long finally finding something worth holding onto. His hand tangled in her hair. Her fingers gripped his shirt. The marks on their wrists blazed with light, silver fire racing between their connected skin. And underneath the physical sensation, Shayla felt something else, a connection that went deeper than touch, deeper than attraction. She could feel his emotions as clearly as her own. His desire, yes, but also his fear that she'd disappear. His determination to protect her. His bone-deep certainty that she was exactly what the world needed. She pulled back slightly, breathless. Is this normal? Feeling what you feel. Kieran's breathing was ragged. The marks create resonance between keeper and warden. Helps with coordination in battle, lets me sense when you're in danger. But this, he touched his forehead to hers. This is more than that. This is us. Us, she repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign and right at the same time. If you want there to be an us. His hand cupped the back of her neck, thumb stroking the sensitive skin there. I meant what I said. This is your choice. I won't push. Won't assume. Whatever you want, whatever you need, that's what this is. Shayla kissed him again, softer this time. Trying to pour everything she couldn't say into the contact. Thank you. I believe you. I'm terrified, but I want this anyway. When they finally pulled apart, the fire had burned down to embers. The cave was dark except for the faint glow of their marks, still pulsing in time with their heartbeats. We should sleep, Kieran said, though he made no move to release her. Tomorrow we need to work on extending your range, seeing how far you can reach without exhausting yourself. Tomorrow, Shayla agreed. But she didn't move either. They sat there in the darkness, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync. And for the first time since the rejection, since the exile, since her entire world had collapsed, Shayla felt safe. Not because she was hidden away or protected by stone walls, but because someone had chosen to stand beside her. Not out of obligation or mark-bound duty, but because he wanted to. Because she was worth choosing. The thought made her chest ache with something too big to name. Kieran? Thank you. For finding me. For believing in me. She paused. For seeing me. His arms tightened around her. Thank you for being worth finding. They stayed like that until sleep finally claimed them both, tangled together beside dying embers, two broken pieces forming something stronger than either had been alone. Outside, the wind shifted. To the south, in Silverfang territory, the Alpha King paced his chambers, unable to sleep, his wolf howling for something just out of reach. And deep in the earth, ancient power stirred, satisfied. The Keeper had found her warden. Now they just had to survive what came next. The attack came on the 14th day. Shayla was at the temple ruins, practicing what Kieran called listening, extending her awareness through the land, feeling for disturbances in the natural balance. She'd gotten good at it over the past 2 weeks. Good enough that she could sense a territorial dispute 3 miles north, could feel a pack gathering for a hunt 5 miles east, could even detect the faint wrongness of a rogue wolf struggling with a corrupted shift along the western border. But she didn't sense them coming until it was too late. The first indication was Kieran's sharp intake of breath. He'd been standing at the edge of the clearing, keeping watch while she trained. Now his entire body had gone rigid, head tilted like he was scenting the air. Kieran? Run. The word was clipped, urgent. Now. Back to the cave. Shayla scrambled to her feet. What? It's not just Silverfang. His eyes were scanning the tree line, wolf gold and dangerous. There are at least 20 wolves converging on this location. Multiple packs. They're coordinated. Her stomach dropped. That's not possible. Packs don't work together. They're too territorial, too. Unless someone convinced them they have a common enemy. The implication hit her like a physical blow. 20 wolves. Multiple packs. All coming for her. Someone had spread the word about what she was. About the power she carried. And instead of seeing a keeper, someone meant to restore balance, they saw a threat. We can't outrun 20 wolves, Shayla said, even as her mind raced through options. The cave was 3 miles away. They'd never make it. No, Kieran's hand went to the knife at his belt. But we can make them regret coming. You can't fight 20 wolves alone. I'm not alone. He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Not fear. Certainty. You're a keeper, Shayla. The land answers to you. So make it answer. Before she could respond, the first wolves broke through the tree line. They came from all sides, gray and brown and black, eyes glowing with predatory focus. Most were shifted, their wolf forms massive and lethal. But a few remained human, hanging back, watching. One of the human figures stepped forward, and Shayla's blood turned to ice. Darius. The Alpha King looked different than he had at the ceremony. Thinner. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his skin had a grayish cast that spoke of illness or exhaustion. His wolf was eating him alive from the inside. She could sense it even from here, the beast's fury at being separated from what it recognized as essential. But his eyes were clear and cold as they locked onto her. Shayla. Her name in his mouth sounded like an accusation. The runaway Omega. The thief. The abomination. I'm none of those things, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. And you know it. I know you destroyed my pack. Darius moved closer, flanked by 2 massive wolves she recognized as his personal guard. I know wolves have died because of what you did. I know our territory is collapsing, our bonds fraying, our strength failing. He stopped at the edge of the clearing. And I know it all started the moment your tainted blood touched the sacred stone. Tainted. The word came out sharp. My blood was the only pure thing in that entire ceremony. You're the one who broke the bond, Darius. You're the one who rejected what the land chose. His expression twisted with fury. The land chose nothing. You're a mistake. An anomaly. Some corrupted throwback to powers that should have stayed dead. She's a keeper, Kieran said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. The first in generations. And if your pack is suffering, it's because you built your entire authority on a foundation you had no right to claim. Darius's attention shifted to Kieran for the first time. And you are someone who actually understands what the marks mean. Kieran's hand moved to his wrist, revealing the silver brand. Someone who knows the old laws. The ones that say when a keeper emerges, all alphas answer to them. Not the other way around. The wolves surrounding the clearing shifted uneasily. Shayla could feel their confusion, their uncertainty. Some of them, the ones from smaller packs, had probably never heard of keepers. But the older ones, the ones with longer memories, they knew. And they were afraid. Old laws are dead, Darius said flatly. We make our own authority now. Which is why everything's falling apart. Shayla took a step forward, drawing his focus back to her. You can't sustain pack bonds through dominance alone, Darius. You need connection. Balance. The land's blessing. And by rejecting me, you rejected all of that. I rejected a weak Omega who had no business being my mate. The words should have hurt. 2 weeks ago they would have devastated her. But now, with power humming through her veins and the land itself recognizing her worth, they just sounded pathetic. You rejected the only thing keeping your pack stable, she corrected. And now you're here, with 20 wolves from rival territories, trying to force me to fix what you broke. Is that about right? Darius's jaw clenched. You're coming back to Silverfang. You're going to restore the bond, heal the territory, and submit to your proper place. And if I refuse? Then we take you by force. He gestured, and the wolves surrounding the clearing moved closer, tightening the circle. You're powerful, I'll grant you that. But you're untrained. Exhausted. And there are 20 of us. Even keepers can be overwhelmed. Shayla felt Kieran tense beside her, ready to fight. Ready to die defending her if that's what it took. The realization made her chest ache. Don't, she said quietly, touching his arm. I won't let you die for me. Then what? She stepped forward, away from Kieran's protective proximity, and addressed the assembled wolves directly. You came here because your alphas told you I'm dangerous. That I need to be controlled or eliminated. But did any of them tell you what I actually am? What the marks mean? Silence. Uncertain glances between the wolves. I'm a keeper, she continued, letting her voice carry. Born of bloodlines you thought were extinct. Chosen by the land itself to maintain balance between wolf and territory. The old packs, the ones that thrived for centuries, they had keepers. Not to rule them, but to ensure their leaders stayed true. To prevent exactly the kind of corruption and chaos you're all experiencing now. Lies, Darius spat. Desperate justifications for stealing power that doesn't belong to you. If it doesn't belong to me, why did the sacred stone crack when my blood touched it? Shayla shot back. Why did your connection to the land sever the moment you rejected me? Why is your wolf tearing you apart from the inside? She took another step forward. You felt it, Darius. In that moment when the bond snapped. You felt the land turn away from you. Don't pretend you didn't. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. She's right. The voice came from one of the other human figures, an older woman Shayla didn't recognize. She wore the marks of a pack elder, wisdom lines deep around her eyes. I've seen the old texts. Read the prophecies. When the sacred stones crack, it means the land is calling for new stewardship. Elder Mira, you can't possibly believe, Darius started. I believe what I've witnessed, Mira interrupted, her tone sharp. Your pack is dying, Alpha King. Not from attack or disease, but from the inside. Bonds failing. Wolves losing themselves. That's not natural. That's not random. She looked at Shayla with something like awe. That's what happens when the land rejects its keeper. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Doubt. Confusion. Fear. Darius's expression went dark. I brought you here to help me retrieve what was stolen, not to question my authority. And I came because you promised proof that she was dangerous, Mira countered. What I see is a young woman with a mark I thought was legend. And an alpha who's so desperate to maintain control that he'll start a war to avoid admitting he made a mistake. Enough. Darius's command cracked through the clearing. I am Alpha King of Silver Fang. My word is law. And I say she comes back. Now. He gestured sharply, and half the wolves lunged forward. Shayla's hands hit the ground on pure instinct. Help me, she thought desperately, not even sure what she was asking for. The land answered. The earth erupted. Roots burst from the ground in a wave of writhing green and brown, forming a barrier between Shayla and the attacking wolves. They crashed into the sudden wall of wood and vegetation, yelping in surprise and pain. But it didn't stop there. The roots kept growing, spreading, following Shayla's panic and fury and desperate need to protect. They wrapped around the legs of the nearest wolves, yanked them off their feet, pinned them to the ground. Vines sprouted from the temple pillars, reaching out like grasping fingers. And through it all, Shayla could feel the land's presence, vast and ancient and angry. They come with violence. They seek to bind the keeper. This will not stand. Shayla, control it. Kieran's voice cut through her panic. You're losing focus. Pull it back. But she couldn't. The power was too much, responding to her fear and translating it into overwhelming force. The roots were everywhere now, tearing through the clearing, destroying the ancient pillars in their wild growth. A wolf yelped in pain as vines tightened around its ribs. Shayla tried to pull back, tried to rein in the chaos, but it was like trying to stop a flood with her bare hands. And then Darius was there, moving faster than should have been possible for someone in his condition. He'd shifted mid-run, his wolf form massive and silver-gray, and he was heading straight for her. Kieran intercepted him. The two wolves collided midair in a tangle of teeth and claws. They hit the ground hard, rolling, each trying for the kill. Kieran was skilled, but Darius was an alpha king. Even diminished, he was formidable. Blood sprayed. Someone screamed. Shayla couldn't tell who. Stop. She pushed everything she had into the word, into making the roots release, into pulling the wild power back under control. The land resisted. It wanted to protect her, wanted to punish those who'd come with violence. But Shayla forced it down, wrestled it into submission through sheer desperate will. The roots stopped growing. The vines went still. And into the sudden silence, a new voice spoke. Well, this is certainly more dramatic than I expected. Every wolf froze. Every head turned toward the source of the voice. A woman stood at the edge of the clearing. Tall, elegant, with silver hair despite appearing young. She wore robes marked with symbols Shayla recognized from the temple visions, the old ones, the first packs. And on her wrist, clearly visible, was a mark identical to Shayla's. Flames and roots intertwined. Impossible, Kieran breathed. You're dead? The woman smiled. Yes, I'm supposed to be. Funny how that works. She walked into the clearing like she owned it, unbothered by the chaos or the dozens of hostile wolves. Her eyes found Shayla and something like satisfaction crossed her face. Hello, child. I've been waiting for you to wake up. Shayla's throat closed. Who are you? My name is Aloan. The woman touched her marked wrist. And I'm the keeper who supposedly died 20 years ago. Her smile turned sharp. Except I didn't die. I was betrayed. Imprisoned. Kept alive just enough to prevent another keeper from emerging. She looked at Darius with pure contempt. By the very bloodline that now claims to rule. The accusation hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Darius shifted back to human form, blood streaming from a gash across his shoulder. That's impossible. My father would never. Your father was the one who ordered it. Aloan's voice was cold. The old Alpha King, so afraid of being held accountable that he locked away the one person who could challenge his corruption. And when I disappeared, the land had no choice but to accept his authority. Broken though it was. You're lying. Am I? Aloan gestured to her mark. This doesn't lie. The land doesn't lie. And neither does the fact that the moment I was freed 3 days ago, when my captor finally died of old age, the sacred stone in Silverfong began searching for a new keeper. She looked at Shayla. It found you. Blood of the scattered lines, strong enough to hear the call even while I still lived. Shayla's mind was reeling. Another keeper. Alive. Someone who actually knew what this power meant, how to use it. Someone who could help. Or someone who could destroy everything. Why reveal yourself now? Kieran asked, his tone wary. He'd moved to Shayla's side, protective despite his injuries. Because I wanted to see what she'd do. Aloan circled Shayla slowly, assessing. Wanted to see if she was worthy. If she'd fight or fold when challenged. A pause. I'm pleased to say she exceeded expectations. This changes nothing, Darius said, though his voice lacked certainty. Even if you're who you claim, that doesn't give her the right to. It gives her every right. Aloan's voice cracked like a whip. She's a keeper, chosen by blood and stone. And you, Alpha King, are a pretender holding power stolen from those who actually earned it. She stepped closer to him, and he actually flinched. Your pack is dying because the land is rejecting you. Your authority is failing because it was never truly yours. And the only way to save what's left is to submit to her authority. Publicly. Completely. I will never. Then watch your pack tear itself apart. Aloan's expression held no mercy. Watch wolves you swore to protect lose themselves to madness. Watch your territory be claimed by rogues and rivals. All because your pride matters more than their survival. The clearing was absolutely silent. Shayla looked at the assembled wolves at their faces twisted with confusion and fear and desperate hope. At Darius, bleeding and furious and broken. At Kieran, watching her with absolute trust even as blood dripped from his wounds. At Aloan, who smiled at her like she knew exactly what choice Shayla would make. You can save them, the older keeper said softly. All you have to do is claim what's already yours. And Shayla realized with crystalline clarity that this was the moment everything had been building toward. Not the exile. Not the rejection. Not even the awakening of her power. This. The choice between mercy and justice. Between saving wolves who'd hurt her and letting them suffer the consequences of their actions. The choice that would define what kind of keeper she became. Shayla. Darius's voice was hoarse. Please. My wolves are dying. And despite everything, despite the exile, the hunting, the cruelty and dismissal and pain, she felt her heart break for them. Shayla looked at Darius, really looked at him, and saw what she'd been too hurt to notice before. He was dying. Not quickly. Not dramatically. But the slow, grinding death of a wolf separated from everything that made him whole. His skin was ashen. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, were glazed with exhaustion. And his wolf, she could feel it now, feel the beast clawing at him from the inside, desperate and confused and slowly going mad. He'd rejected her to be free. Instead, he'd sentenced himself to this. You want me to save them, Shayla said quietly. After everything. After exile and judgment and being hunted like prey. You want me to fix what you broke? Yes. The word came out broken. I was wrong. About you. About the bond. About, his voice cracked. I thought I knew what strength looked like. Thought it was dominance and control and never showing weakness. But I was wrong. You're only saying this because you're suffering. She kept her tone even, factual. If the pack was stable, if your wolf was quiet, you'd still see me as nothing. He flinched. Didn't deny it. That's what I thought. Shayla turned to the other wolves, addressing them directly. Your alpha brought you here to force me to submit. to drag me back to Silver Fong and make me fix what his rejection destroyed. But submission isn't how this works. Balance isn't maintained through coercion. Elder Mira stepped forward. Then how is it maintained? Through truth. Shayla gestured to the ruins around them. Through acknowledging what's real instead of clinging to comfortable lies. Your packs are built on dominance hierarchies that have no connection to the land you inhabit. You fight for territory without understanding that territory isn't something you conquer, it's something that accepts you. Or rejects you. Pretty words, one of the other alphas called out. But what does that actually mean? Shayla closed her eyes, reaching for the connection she'd been building over the past 2 weeks. Feeling the land beneath her feet, the vast web of life and power that connected everything. And then she opened herself completely. The shift was instantaneous. Every wolf in the clearing gasped as they suddenly felt what she felt. The earth's heartbeat. The flow of water through distant streams. The growth of roots deep underground. The flight of birds overhead. Everything connected. Everything alive. And underneath it all, the places where that connection was broken. Silverfong territory blazed like an infected wound in her awareness. But it wasn't alone. She could feel other fractures, smaller but growing. Packs that had built their strength on conquest rather than cooperation. Alphas who ruled through fear instead of earning their authority. The modern world was eating itself alive, and no one had noticed because they'd forgotten what health felt like. "This is what I feel," Shayla said, her voice resonating with power. Every moment, every breath. The land crying out for balance. For someone to care. For someone to remember what we're supposed to be. She released the connection and the wolves stumbled, gasping like they'd been holding their breath underwater. That's Elder Myra's voice shook. That's what it used to feel like. Before. When I was young and the old alpha still lived. That sense of connection. Before your pack forgot, Eloan said quietly. Before dominance became more important than harmony. Darius had dropped to his knees. Tears streaked his face from pain or revelation. Shayla couldn't tell. I didn't know. I didn't. How do we fix it? You can't, Shayla said simply. The bond you rejected can't be restored. You severed your connection to the land when you chose pride over partnership. Then I'm dead. Not a question. Acceptance. Eventually, yes. Your wolf will consume you from the inside. The madness will take you. She paused, let the weight of it settle. Unless you do something no alpha has done in generations. What? Step down. The words fell like stones into still water. Acknowledge that your authority was built on false foundations. Release your pack from bonds you never had the right to forge. And let the land choose who leads them next. The clearing erupted in chaos. Wolves shouting, arguing, some calling her insane, others actually considering it. You're asking me to destroy everything my family built, Darius said. I'm asking you to stop poisoning your wolves with a structure that's killing them. Shayla crouched down, meeting his eyes at level. Your pack is suffering. Not because they're weak, but because they're being forced to sustain bonds through a connection you don't actually have. Every day you remain alpha, the rot spreads deeper. And if I step down, what happens to them? The land chooses a new alpha. Someone who can actually forge the connection. Someone who earns authority instead of inheriting it. She touched his shoulder, gentle despite everything. Someone who might actually be able to save what's left. Darius looked at her for a long moment. Then his gaze shifted to his wolves, the ones who'd come here at his command, who'd risked everything because he'd asked them to. They were watching him with desperate hope. Will it stop the suffering? He asked quietly. If I step down, will my wolves heal? Yes, Shayla said. It won't be immediate. The damage runs deep. But without your false claim draining them, the land can begin rebuilding proper bonds. He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Might choose his pride over his people one final time. Then he stood, turned to face the assembled Silver Fong wolves, and spoke in a voice that carried despite its brokenness. I, Darius of the Silver Blood, Alpha King of Silver Fong, release my claim. The words seemed to cost him everything. I renounce my authority, my title, my bonds to pack and territory. I stepped down freely and completely so that the land may choose true leadership. The effect was immediate. The air itself seemed to shift. Shayla felt the severed bonds between Darius and his wolves finally, completely dissolve. Felt the weight of false authority lift from the Silver Fang territory like a physical thing. And in the void left behind, the land began to reach out, searching for connection. Darius collapsed. Several wolves rushed forward to catch him, their expressions torn between relief and grief. What now? Elder Mira asked, her voice shaking. Who do we? The land will choose, Aloan said. Give it time. Someone among you will feel the call. Someone who can actually sustain the connection. She looked at Shayla with something like pride. In the meantime, your keeper has work to do. Shayla's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Silver Fang isn't the only corrupted territory. And you're not going to fix the damage by staying hidden in caves. Aloan's smile was sharp. You wanted to know what being a keeper means? It means going to every broken pack, every false alpha, every corrupted territory, and demanding they choose, evolve or collapse. That's suicide, Kieran said flatly. She's one person. She can't take on entire packs. She's not one person. Aloan gestured to the assembled wolves. She's the voice of the land itself. And every wolf who remembers what that means will follow her. Because deep down, they're desperate for someone to care about more than power. Shayla looked at the wolves surrounding her. At their faces, scared and hopeful and uncertain. At Darius, broken but finally free. At Kieran, bleeding and fierce and absolutely loyal. At Aloan, who'd survived 20 years of imprisonment and come out still believing this mattered. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Neither did I at first. Aloan touched her marked wrist. But you'll learn. And you won't be alone. She turned to address the crowd. Anyone who wants to see the old ways restored, who remembers what true pack bonds feel like, you can follow her. Fight beside her. Help rebuild what's been broken. Silence. Then Elder Mira stepped forward. I'll follow. My pack needs what she offers. One by one, others joined her. Not all of them. Not even most. But enough that Shayla felt something shift in her chest. She wasn't alone. A sound cut through the clearing, sharp and wrong. An alarm, distant but growing closer. Kieran's head snapped up. Rogues. At least 30. Moving fast. They must have sensed the power surge, Aloan said grimly. When Darius released his claim, it sent ripples through every nearby territory. Every unstable wolf within 50 miles just felt pack bonds dissolve. And they think it's a weakness to exploit, Shayla finished. Exactly. Aloan's eyes gleamed. So here's your first real test, young keeper. You wanted to save the Silver Fang wolves? Prove you can. The rogues broke through the tree line like a wave of teeth and madness. They were corrupted, Shayla could feel it immediately. Wolves who'd lost themselves, their human and beast sides at war, leaving only violence and hunger. Some had clearly been turned rogue recently, still wearing the tattered remains of pack clothing. Others looked like they'd been wild for years, more monster than wolf. And they were heading straight for the weakest targets, the Silver Fang wolves, exhausted and bondless and vulnerable. Shayla didn't think. She acted. Her hands hit the earth, and this time, when she called the power, it came smoothly. No wild chaos. No loss of control. Just focused, deliberate force. The ground erupted in a controlled wave, creating a barrier of stone and root between the rogues and their targets. The corrupted wolves slammed into it, snarling in fury. Get the injured to safety, she shouted to the gathered wolves. Anyone who can fight, form a perimeter. They responded instantly, muscle memory overriding confusion. Even the wolves from other packs fell into formation, because threat assessment transcended pack politics. Kieran was at her side immediately. What's the plan? I'm going to try something. Shayla pressed both palms flat to the earth, reaching deeper than she ever had before. feeling not just the land's surface, but its memory. Its knowledge of what wolves were supposed to be. The rogues, they're not evil. They're broken. Disconnected. If I can reach them, restore even a fraction of their connection to the earth, they might remember who they are, Kieran finished. Understanding lit his eyes. But that's going to take everything you have. I know. And if it doesn't work, then you kill them before they kill us. She met his gaze. But I have to try. He nodded, stepped back, gave her space. Shayla closed her eyes and dove deep. The land's presence rushed up to meet her, vast and eager. She could feel its hunger to heal, to restore, to bring balance back to what had been twisted. Help me, she thought. Show me how to reach them. The response was immediate. Power flooded through her in a silver torrent, not destructive but clarifying. She felt it spread outward from where she knelt, racing through the earth like lightning through water. When it touched the first rogue, the wolf screamed. Not in pain, in recognition. The corrupted beast froze mid-charge, its eyes widening. For just a moment, Shayla felt its consciousness, fractured and screaming and so lost. She showed it the way home. The connection was there, buried under years of violence and isolation. The thread that bound wolf to earth, beast to purpose. She grabbed it, pulled it to the surface, forced the rogue to remember what it had forgotten. You are not a monster. You are a child of this land. Remember. Remember. The wolf shuddered. Shifted back to human, a young man,
Don't.
barely 20,
Ella cut
naked
him off.
and sobbing.
Couldn't hear him finish
I didn't.
that
What did
sentence.
You're
Just
safe
don't.
now, Elder Mira
She
said,
looked at the documents.
moving forward to
At the
cover him with
evidence
her
of
cloak.
systematic betrayal.
You're safe.
At the
But there were
carefully
29 more
constructed trap
rogues.
designed to
Shayla
destroy
reached
her
for the
children.
next one.
And
Then the
she
next.
made a decision.
Then the next.
I'm withdrawing
Each
from
connection
the
was
summit.
agony, feeling
Her
their
voice
fractured
was steady.
minds, their
I'm
years
taking
of
Luna
suffering,
and Ash
their
and
desperate
leaving
violence
Pact
born
territory,
from being cut off from
disappearing.
everything that
If
made
I'm
them
not
whole.
there to challenge,
But she held
they
on,
can't demand
pulled them back,
execution.
showed
Can't
them
make
the path to
examples.
balance.
Can't.
One by
They'll
one,
hunt you.
the
Stellan
rogues stopped
interrupted.
attacking,
Declare you
shifted
rogue.
back,
Send
collapsed,
enforcers.
sobbing or
You'll
screaming
spend the rest
or
of your
just
life
staring
running.
in shock.
And Luna
one by
and
one,
Ash will
the
grow
wolves
up as
around
fugitives.
Shayla moved to help
Hunted.
them.
Unsafe.
To cover their nakedness,
Never
to
able
offer
to claim
water,
their
to
birthright.
speak gentle
Better
words to
alive and
shattered
fugitive
minds.
than dead
By
and
the time
vindicated.
she reached the last
Is it?
rogue,
Aiden's
Shayla was
question was
shaking so
soft,
hard she
because
could barely
that's not
sit
the
upright.
lesson we want to teach
Power
them.
had poured through
That
her
running
like water
is the
through
answer
a sieve,
when systems
and
fail.
she had nothing left.
That hiding is
But
safer
the last
than
rogue
standing.
wasn't like the others.
That fear wins.
This one was old.
I'm not teaching them
ancient,
anything
even,
if they're dead.
completely
And you're
consumed by
teaching
its
them
beast.
nothing valuable
No trace
if they
of
survive
human
by running.
consciousness left at all.
Aiden's composure
It
cracked.
looked at her with eyes
Ella,
like
I know
pits
you're
and
terrified.
lunged. Kieran
I'm
intercepted
terrified.
it mid-leap.
The thought
his
of
wolf
losing
form
them, his
massive
voice
and
broke
gray.
completely.
They collided
But
with
running means
bone-breaking
they
force.
never get to be
Kieran,
themselves.
don't.
Never
Shayla
get
reached
to
out
live
desperately,
openly.
trying to
Never
form
get
one
to
more
change
connection,
the world the way
trying
you
to
have.
save one more lost
They
soul.
become exactly
The
what
rogue's
Saris
jaws
wants,
closed around
who marked
Kieran's
wolves
shoulder,
who hide,
and something
who
inside
diminish
Shayla
themselves,
snapped.
who
Silver
live in
fire
fear.
exploded from her
I
in a
don't care
wave
about
of
symbolism
pure
right
protective
now.
fury.
I care
It
about
slammed
survival.
into the rogue,
Then
lifting
survive
it
by
bodily
winning,
off Kieran
by
and
standing,
hurling it backward.
by proving
But
that
this
even
wasn't the
when
healing
threatened
power
with the
she'd been
worst,
using.
you choose
This was
courage over
judgment.
fear.
The rogue
He
hit the
moved
ground
closer.
and the silver
We can
flames
win this.
consumed it.
Together.
Not painfully,
But
there was
only if
mercy
you're willing
even
to
in her
fight
rage,
instead of run.
but completely.
Ella looked at
when
him,
the light faded,
at
there was
Stellan,
nothing left
at the
but
council
ash
members,
and
watching
silence.
with varying expressions
Shayla stared
of
at her hands,
fear and
at the
determination.
silver flames still
If I
dancing
stay,
along
if
her
I
fingers,
fight and we
at
lose,
the proof
my
that she
children
could
die.
destroy as easily
That's the cost
as she
of your
healed.
courage.
Some
If
can't
you
be
run,
saved,
reformation
Aloan
dies.
said quietly,
Every
appearing
moon-marked
at her
wolf
side.
becomes a target.
Some have been lost too
Everything
long,
we've built
hurt too deeply.
collapses.
That's the
Aiden's
burden
voice
of being
was
keeper.
gentle despite
Knowing
the
when
words.
to heal and when
There's
to
no
end
safe
suffering.
choice here.
Shayla wanted
Just
to argue.
which principles
Wanted to
do
say
we
there
die
had to
for?
be another way.
If dying
but the
becomes
rogue had
necessary,
been completely consumed.
the calculation
there had been
was
nothing
brutal,
left to save.
impossible.
Just an echo
a
of
choice
violence
no
trapped in
parent
a
should
body
ever
that
have to
couldn't
make.
die.
But
She'd granted
Ella
it
had
peace,
learned something
even
crucial
if it
over
felt
the
like
past
failure.
5 years.
Kieran,
Some
she
choices
turned to
couldn't
find
be
him
avoided,
already shifted
could
back
only
to
be
human,
faced with as
clutching
much
his
courage
bleeding
as you
shoulder.
could gather.
I'm
If
fine,
we do
he
this,
said, though
if
his
we
face
fight,
was
I
pale.
need complete honesty.
Flesh wound.
No
Let
more
me.
protection.
She reached for him,
No
and
more
healing
secrets.
power flowed
No more
instinctively.
deciding what I can handle.
Silver light wrapped
She
around
looked
his
at
injury,
Aiden,
knitting torn
Everything.
flesh, easing
Every
pain.
piece of information.
When it faded,
Every
only a
risk.
faint scar remained.
Every possibility.
Thank you, he
No
murmured,
matter how terrible.
pulling her close despite
Agreed.
the audience.
And I lead
You
the
did it.
defense.
You saved
My
them.
children.
Shayla
My
looked around the
testimony.
clearing.
My
At
strategy.
the 29 rogues who were now
Agreed.
struggling but
And
conscious,
if we win, when we win,
surrounded
things
by
don't go
wolves
back.
offering comfort
We stay
instead
separated.
of violence.
We
At the
maintain
Silver Fawn
boundaries.
Pack, weak
We
but
don't
alive,
let victory erase
their
the
false
reasons we
bonds
chose
severed,
autonomy.
but the possibility
Aiden's
of true
expression
connection
flickered with
finally
pain.
opened to them.
But he
At
nodded.
Darius,
Agreed.
watching her with something
Ella
like
took a
awe
breath.
and terrible
Then we
regret.
fight.
At
Together,
Ellen,
but separate.
smiling like she'd
Honest,
just witnessed
but boundaried.
exactly what she'd been
And
waiting
we
20
prove that
years to
love
see.
doesn't require
This
partnership.
is what being a keeper means,
That strength
the older
doesn't
woman
require
said.
unity.
Impossible
that
choices,
moonmarked wolves can lead
unbearable
without becoming the
responsibility,
monsters everyone
saving
fears.
those who tried to destroy
Together,
you.
Aiden
She
echoed.
touched Shayla's marked
Together,
wrist.
Stellan added.
Can you carry it?
My
Shayla
sister's
thought
betrayal.
about the alpha who'd
I'll
rejected
testify
her,
against her.
the pack that had exiled
Expose
her,
her manipulation.
the wolves who'd hunted
Proof
her.
that not all
She thought about the
moon-marked wolves
29
fear
rogues
themselves.
who'd been given a
2
second
days,
chance,
Ella said.
about the
We
Silver
have 2
Fawn
days to
wolves who
prepare.
might finally
To
heal,
build a defense
about
that
balance
can't be
being
broken.
restored,
To
one
demonstrate
impossible
that
choice
even
at a
when
time.
faced with execution,
I don't know, she said
we
honestly,
choose reason over
but
rage.
I'm going to try.
She looked at the
Alone's
assembled wolves.
smile widened.
At the council
Good,
that had
because
supported
we have
her.
work to do,
At the
and
reforms
a world
they'd built.
full of false
At
alphas
the
to
future
dethrone.
hanging in the balance.
Kieran's hand found
2
hers,
days, she
their
repeated.
marks pressed together,
Let's make them count.
pulsing in sync.
The summit began
Together,
with
he said.
tradition.
Together,
Formal
she
challenges,
agreed.
witnesses,
And as the sun
evidence
finally broke
presented
through the clouds,
in careful order.
illuminating the clearing
Saris
in golden
testified
light,
first.
Shayla felt
Calm,
something shift
controlled.
deep inside her.
Her moon-marked
She wasn't the
eyes,
broken,
silver like
exiled
Ella's,
Omega anymore.
projected authority
She was a
and
keeper.
reason.
And the
I've
alpha
hidden my
king who'd
power
smiled
for
at her
40
rejection,
years.
he
She
was
told
about to
the
learn that
assembled
some
packs,
mistakes echoed
not
across
from
lifetimes.
shame, from
3 months
necessity.
later, the
Because
world
I've
looked
seen
different.
what happens when
Not
moon-marked
physically,
wolves
the
lose
trees
control.
still grew. The
I
wind
felt the
still
pull
blew,
of that power.
the moon
The
still
way it
rose
responds
full
to
and
emotion.
silver every
The
28
way
days.
rage becomes
But
fire
underneath
becomes
the surface,
destruction.
in the
She
places where
gestured to
power
Luna,
and purpose
sitting between
intertwined,
Ella and
everything
Aiden.
had shifted.
That child
Shayla
nearly
stood at the
killed
edge
a
of what had
packmate.
once been neutral
7 years
territory,
old
looking
and
down at
already
the valley
unable
where
to
5
control
different
what
packs
she
had gathered.
carries.
Not
And
to
you
fight,
want her to inherit?
not to establish
Want her to lead?
dominance,
Want
but
to
to
trust
witness
that
something that
adolescence,
hadn't happened
with
in generations.
all its emotional chaos,
The choosing of a true
won't trigger
alpha.
something
Below,
catastrophic.
in a cleared
The
space at the
traditionalist
valley's
packs
center,
murmured
stood
agreement.
the sacred stone
Even
of the
some
Rivermere
Reformation
pack.
supporters
Their
looked
old
uncertain.
alpha had stepped
Queen
down 2
Ella
weeks
claims
ago,
control.
not because
Saris
Shayla had forced
continued.
him, but
Claims
because
her
he
power
felt the
serves
land
instead
pulling
of
away from him.
dominates.
Because
But I
he'd
ask
understood,
you, how long until
finally,
emotion
that holding
overwhelms
power
reason?
through strength
How long
alone
until
was
threat to her
slowly
children
killing
triggers the
everyone
same
under his
rage her daughter
protection.
showed?
Now his
How long
wolves
until we're
waited,
all ashes
anxious and
because we
hopeful,
valued
to see who
idealism
the
over
land would
safety?
choose.
She turned to
Nervous?
face Ella
Kieran's
directly.
voice was soft
I don't
against her
testify
ear.
from hate.
He stood close
I
enough
testify
that she
from
could feel
40
his
years
warmth,
of experience.
his steady presence that had
Moon-marked wolves
become
are
as
dangerous.
necessary as breathing.
Not because we're
Terrified,
evil.
she
Because
admitted.
we're powerful
What if it doesn't
without the
work?
centuries of
What if the
conditioning
land
that
doesn't choose
teaches
anyone?
control.
It will.
We're children
His
with
hand
weapons.
found hers,
And
their
giving us
marks
authority
pressing
is
together
suicide.
in that familiar
The
pulse
words
of
landed
connection.
devastatingly.
You've healed 6
A
territories
moon-marked
in
wolf
3
arguing
months,
against
Shayla.
her own kind.
Restored balance
40
to places
years of
that were
hiding
collapsing.
presented as
The
wisdom
land
rather
trusts
than
you.
fear.
It'll answer.
Ella wanted to rage.
She wanted to believe
wanted
him.
to prove
But
every
doubt was a
accusation right
persistent
by
companion,
demonstrating
whispering
exactly
that
how
she was still
dangerous she
just
could
playing
be.
at power she didn't
Instead,
truly
she
understand.
stayed seated.
Movement
Hands
below caught her
folded,
attention.
face calm,
A young woman had
breathing
stepped
through the
forward from the
fury.
gathered Rivermere
Aiden's
wolves.
hand found
Not
hers
the
under the
strongest
table.
or the most
Brief,
dominant. But when her
supportive,
hand touched the
then
sacred
released.
stone, silver
Maintaining
light
boundaries
blazed upward.
even in crisis.
The mark appeared on
The
her
challenge
wrist, flames
proceeded.
and roots intertwined.
Traditionalists
though
presented
simpler
evidence.
than Shayla's.
Luna's loss
Not
of
a keeper's
control.
mark.
Ella's
An
public
alpha's mark,
separation from
given by the
Aiden,
land itself,
proof
not
of
inherited
instability.
through blood.
The
valley
conspiracy that had
erupted in
operated for
celebration.
5 years under
Shayla felt tears
Reformation's
prick her
nose.
eyes.
Every
7
failure
territories now.
magnified.
7
Every
packs
success
rebuilding on
minimized.
foundations of
Then they
connection
made their
instead
demand.
of conquest.
Luna and Ash
7 sacred
declared
stones
unfit for
reawakened.
succession.
7 true
Ella
bonds
removed
formed.
from authority.
It was working.
Moo-marked
Slowly,
protections revoked.
painfully, against
Return to
resistance
traditional
that sometimes
hierarchies where
turned violent.
dangerous
But
bloodlines
it
could
was
be
working.
properly controlled.
You should be down there,
And if
Alone
Queen Ella
said,
refuses,
materializing
Elder
beside
Thorne
them with her
asked from the
uncanny
High
habit of
Council's
appearing
physician.
exactly when
The
her
lead
presence would be
traditionalist,
most
an
unsettling.
alpha named
They're
Garrick,
celebrating because
smiled
of you.
coldly.
They're
Then we
celebrating
invoke
because their
ancient
alpha
law,
actually
trial
earned her
by
authority,
combat.
Shayla
If she
corrected.
believes
I
Moo-marked
just
control is
facilitated.
real, Let her
You
prove it.
restructured their entire
Fight without her
understanding of
power.
power.
Demonstrate that
smile was
she's
sharp
more
with
than the
approval.
threat she carries.
Don't diminish that.
That's
What you're doing,
barbaric.
what we're
Ivy
doing,
protested.
it's revolution.
That's law.
And
Garrett
revolutions are
countered.
never comfortable.
Old law,
No,
but still
they
valid.
weren't.
If she
Shayla
wins
still bore the
without
scars
using
from the
moon-marked
packs that had
power,
fought back.
we accept
The alphas
reformation
who'd seen her as a
continues.
threat to
Her
everything
children
they'd
remain
built.
heirs.
The wolves
If
who'd
she
chosen
loses, he
familiar
shrugged.
suffering over
The
uncertain
region
change.
decides what
3
happens to dangerous
territories had
bloodlines,
refused her completely,
meaning execution,
had driven her out with
meaning Luna
violence,
and Ash would
unwilling
die
to
if
admit
Ella
their
lost.
foundations were
I
crumbling.
accept, Ella
She'd
said
had to walk
before
away,
anyone could object.
had to let them collapse
Ella,
under the weight
no,
of their own
Aiden
corruption.
started.
It
I
still
accept the
hurt.
challenge.
Stop,
Trial
Kieran
by
murmured,
combat.
sensing the
No
direction of
moon-marked
her
power.
thoughts.
Just
You can't
she
save
stood.
everyone,
Just a mother
especially those who
protecting her
don't want
children.
saving.
That
I
enough
know,
for you?
but
Garrick's
you
smile
wish
widened.
you could anyway.
More than
His
enough.
thumb traced
The
circles on her
combat
palm.
was scheduled for dawn.
That's what makes you different
giving
from the
Ella
alphas you're
12 hours
deposing.
to prepare.
You actually
She
care about
spent
the
them
wolves
with her
suffering
children.
under false authority.
Luna cried.
Below,
Mama,
the new
don't.
Rivermere Alpha
Please
was
don't.
addressing her pack.
I don't want you to
her
get
voice
hurt
carrying
because of me.
even to their
This
elevated
isn't because
position.
of you, baby.
Speaking
It's
of
because of
connection
wolves
and
who fear
responsibility
change,
and earning
who'd
trust
rather destroy
rather than
difference
demanding
than learn
obedience.
from it.
Speaking
Ella
the
held her
words
daughter
Shayla
close.
had taught her.
And
It's
I'm going to
spreading,
win.
Aloan
Going to
observed with
prove that
satisfaction.
power with control
The old
is
ways,
strength,
the
not
true
threat.
ways.
What if
Every
you don't?
pack that transitions
Ash's quiet
successfully
voice.
makes the next
What
one
if you
easier.
lose?
She paused.
Then your father will protect
Eventually,
you.
the false
Take you somewhere
alphas will
safe.
run out of territory
Raise you to
hide in.
understand. Her
And then
voice
what?
caught. To
Shayla
understand
asked.
that some things
Then
are
they
worth
fight,
fighting for.
or they submit,
even when
or
fighting
they watch
means
their packs
risking
abandon
everything.
them for leaders who
I don't want
actually
you to
deserve
risk
loyalty.
everything, Ash
Aloan's
whispered.
expression was
I
merciless.
want you to stay.
The land is patient, but it's not infinite. Eventually, balance will be restored, whether they cooperate or not. A familiar presence brushed against Shayla's awareness, distant but distinct. She'd been feeling it more often lately, a consciousness reaching out from the south. Seeking. Desperate. Darius. The former Alpha King hadn't stopped trying to reach her. Letters delivered by neutral parties. Messages sent through Elder Mira, who now served as advisor to Silver Fang's new Alpha. Even dreams sometimes, his wolf howling across the distance that separated them. All saying the same thing, I'm sorry. I understand now. Please. Shayla never responded. Some wounds ran too deep for apologies to bridge. He's dying, Aloan said, reading her thoughts with unsettling accuracy. Without a bond to anchor him, his wolf is consuming him from the inside. He is maybe 6 months. A year at most. I know. You could save him. Forge a new bond. Not as mates, that ship sailed when he rejected you. But as keeper to wolf. It would stabilize him. Ease his suffering. I know, Shayla repeated. But you won't. It wasn't a question. Aloan knew her well enough by now to understand. He made his choice, Shayla said quietly. He chose pride over partnership. Power over connection. And now he's living with the consequences of that choice. That's not cruelty. That's balance. Some would call it revenge. Some would be wrong. Shayla met the older keeper's eyes. I don't want him to suffer. But I won't save him from consequences he earned. That wouldn't be mercy. It would be enabling the same pattern that destroyed the packs in the first place, powerful wolves escaping accountability because someone else paid their debts. Aloan's smile was approving. You're learning. I'm trying. Below, the celebration was spreading. Wolves from different packs mingling freely, sharing food and stories, building connections that transcended territorial boundaries. It was the kind of scene that would have been impossible 4 months ago. The kind of scene that gave Shayla hope. There's news from the north, Kieran said, his tone shifting to something more serious. The coalition of alphas who've been resisting the changes. They're gathering. Planning something. Shayla's stomach tightened. She'd known this was coming. Knew that eventually, the wolves who'd built empires on dominance wouldn't just roll over and accept restructuring. How many? At least 12 packs. Maybe more. He paused. They're calling themselves the Old Guard. Claiming you're destroying tradition, corrupting the natural order. The natural order that's been slowly poisoning them for generations. They don't see it that way. Kieran's expression was grim. They see power slipping away, authority being challenged, and they're willing to fight to keep what they have. Then we fight back. Aloan's voice was hard. We've rebuilt enough territories now that we have allies. Wolves who remember what true bonds feel like. They'll stand with us. This isn't a war, Shayla protested. This is supposed to be healing, not. Sometimes healing requires cutting out infection, Aloan interrupted. Sometimes balance can only be restored through conflict. That's the hard truth you're going to have to accept, Shayla. Not every alpha will see reason. Not every pack will choose evolution over extinction. The words settled over her like a shroud. She'd known this was possible. Had known that restructuring the entire wolf world couldn't happen peacefully. But knowing abstractly and facing the reality were very different things. When, she asked Kieran. They're planning to move in 2 weeks. Coordinated attacks on the territories you've already healed, trying to destabilize the new alphas before their bonds fully form. 2 weeks. 14 days to prepare for a confrontation that could either cement the changes she'd started or destroy everything. We need to warn the new alphas, Shayla said, her mind already racing through logistics. Help them fortify their territories. Gather our allies. We need you to rest, Kieran interrupted gently. You've healed 6 territories in 3 months. You barely sleep. You push yourself until you collapse and then you get up and do it again. His hand cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're going to burn out, Shayla. And we need you strong for what's coming. She wanted to argue. Wanted to say she was fine, that she could handle it. But the truth was she was exhausted. Bone deep, soul tired in ways she'd never experienced before. The constant use of power, the emotional weight of facing broken packs and desperate wolves, the responsibility of knowing that her choices could save or doom hundreds. It was crushing. One day, she compromised. I'll rest for 1 day. Then we prepare. Kieran looked like he wanted to push for more, but he nodded. 1 day. I'll take it. Aloan was watching them with an expression that might have been fondness. Might have been approval. With her, it was hard to tell. You two are good together, she said. Keeper and warden. It's how the bond is supposed to work. Balance in all things. Shayla felt heat rise to her cheeks. What she and Kieran had become over the past 3 months was complicated. More than allies. More than friends. But neither of them had put words to it, too focused on survival and revolution to define something that felt both inevitable and terrifying. We work well together, she said carefully. You love each other, Aloan corrected bluntly. And you're both too afraid to say it because loss has taught you that naming something makes it easier to lose. Her smile was sad. But naming it also makes it real. Makes it worth fighting for. Shayla looked at Kieran. At the man who'd appeared out of nowhere to save her, who'd believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself, who stood beside her through every impossible choice and never once wavered. The words stuck in her throat. Later, Kieran said softly, understanding. When this is over. When we've survived what's coming. We'll find the words then. If they survived. The thought was a cold whisper in the back of her mind. 12 packs, coordinated and desperate. Even with allies, even with the land's blessing, the odds were brutal. She could die. They could all die. And everything she'd built would crumble, leaving the wolf world to spiral back into the same toxic patterns that had nearly destroyed it. Or, the land whispered through their connection, you could win. Could show them that the old ways were better. That connection is stronger than dominance. That a keeper's authority outweighs any alpha's pride. You could change everything. Yes, Shayla whispered. I could. Below, the celebration continued. Wolves dancing under moonlight, their bonds forming and strengthening, the land humming with approval. Above, Shayla stood between past and future, between mercy and justice, between the Omega she'd been and the Keeper she was becoming. The Alpha King who'd smiled at her rejection was dying, alone and broken. The packs who'd built empires on false foundations were gathering to destroy her. The land itself was watching, waiting to see if she was strong enough to carry what she'd claimed. And somewhere in the space between doubt and determination, Shayla made a choice. She would fight. Not because she wanted to. Not because she enjoyed conflict or craved power. But because the wolves suffering under corrupt alphas deserved better. Because true bonds were worth defending. Because balance, real balance, was worth any cost. Even if that cost was everything. Shayla turned to Kieran, to Eloan, to the future stretching out before her like a blade's edge. 2 weeks, she said. We have 2 weeks to prepare. So, let's make them count. Her mark flared silver in the moonlight. And the land, ancient and patient and vast, whispered its approval. Would you have chosen her path? Would you have forgiven the alpha who smiled while you bled? Would you have saved the wolves who exiled you, knowing they'd never truly accept what you'd become? Or would you have let them collapse under the weight of their own corruption, chosen your own survival over their redemption? Shayla chose to fight for a world that had never fought for her. She chose to restore balance to those who'd destroyed hers. She chose to become something the wolf world had forgotten could exist, a keeper who cared more about healing than power, more about connection than control. But the question remains, is she a hero bringing light to darkness? Or just a woman cursed with too much fire, burning everything she touches while calling it salvation? The old guard is coming. The false alphas are gathering. And the final battle for the soul of the wolf world is about to begin. If this story lit something inside you, if Shayla's journey from rejected Omega to revolutionary keeper made you feel seen, made you believe that broken things can be rebuilt into something stronger, then subscribe to Shayla's Romance Library. Because here, in this space, we tell stories that refuse to accept that power belongs only to those born with it. We tell stories about women who were dismissed as weak, discovering they were the strongest thing in the room all along. We tell stories that burn with truth, bleed with emotion, and never, ever apologize for demanding that love be earned instead of taken. Shayla's story isn't over. The Alpha King is still dying, still reaching across the distance, still hoping for forgiveness he doesn't deserve. The revolution is still building, still spreading, still threatening to tear the wolf world apart or remake it into something better. And the Keeper, who was once nothing more than a rejected Omega? She's standing at the center of it all, silver flames dancing on her fingertips, the land itself singing through her veins. Ready to show the world exactly what they lost the moment they let her go. Subscribe to Shayla's Romance Library. Because some rejections don't break you. They remake you into something the world was never prepared to handle. And when the Alpha King finally understands what he threw away, it will be far too late.